That is the Abarth 600e, and that is the Mini Aceman JCW, which means we have a pair of very closely aligned medium-sized electric hot hatches. So in this video, we're going to find out which is best suited to your lifestyle and, of course, which one is more fun. So starting with design, these two cars go about things pretty differently. While they look very similar in size, you'll see, well, how much more aggressive the Abarth is on the nose. If you look up here, not only do we have the 500 and 600 headlights, but you've also got this very angular line down here. It feels a lot more cluttered in some ways versus the Mini. The Aceman is a very simple design. Somewhat boring, I'd say, but I guess to some people's eyes, it's probably the cleaner car. And look, if you look at it from this angle, it's basically just blunt-faced. It's more SUV-like, therefore. And on the side, we have smaller wheels on this Aceman. They're 19s versus the 20s on the Abarth, but I like them on this Mini. But then you look at the ones on the Abarth and you think, oh, these are much nicer. And I should note that this is the Scorpionissima trim, which means you get a few extra goodies, not just outside, but also inside, which I'll show you in a moment. Looking around to the side of the car, I mean, they've basically slapped on a few extra bits to the 600e, and that's no bad thing. Look, the rear spoiler here is squared off and not particularly pretty, but does feature some aero bits. And it's actually inspired by the permanently opened engine cover of the rear-engined Abarth TC from back in the 60s. And then on the Mini, it's a much more straight, flat, horizontal affair, but you do get these cool rear lights, which I think if you change your drive modes can actually change the lighting. So much less exciting design on the Mini, but to some eyes, I imagine it will be the smarter, more mature car. But these are hot hatches. Surely this one wins. Now on paper, these two cars do look remarkably similar, not least because they have a very similar battery size. They both have about the same claimed range, and also charging speeds are very similar. Although as you'll see on the stats on screen, they are slightly different. But this Mini does have one feature that leaves me thinking it might actually hold an advantage today, although the Abarth has a couple. Now the feature on the Mini is the set of Hankook Evo R tyres, which, as you can see by the tread pattern, look very summer focused, and it's handy because today is the summer, so it means these might have more grip. But the Abarth, while it has a bigger alloy wheel, it only gets Michelin's Pilot Sport EV tyres. And you say only, wait, this is a Michelin, they are good tyres, but they're EV focused, which means the priority is going to be partly on range as well as grip. So is this going to give us less traction? There is, however, one key thing under there, and that is a limited slip differential, because the Abarth 600e comes with a limited slip diff, meaning it juggles the power on the front axle, whereas the Mini, well, that might be one of its key disadvantages. We'll find out in a little bit. Now, if you're enjoying this video, please do hit the subscribe button, because I'm new to this freelancing YouTubing game on my own, so I need every subscriber I can get to keep this up. So hit that button and keep watching. Now, before I get out and drive the cars, let's quickly look at their interiors, which they probably will be familiar to you because neither of them are brand spanking new. But look, let's look at this Mini, because it really does feel so different to everything else in the class, largely because, of course, the central screen over here, which I'm sure you're familiar with the details now. You've got Apple CarPlay and everything, which works wirelessly as well if your phone's connected. And the system itself is nice and easy to use. You haven't got too many graphics, and the screen is unique, as you can see. And this is crucial. You've got, while it's a touch screen, you have got your temperature on screen at all times, so you can make those quick adjustments. But there are no physical buttons for climate, which is a negative. There are, however, a few buttons down here. So your starter is actually just like the old key in the original Mini, and the steering wheel retains a few buttons as well, familiar to BMW drivers as well as Mini drivers, including one crucial one, which is the set button, because you press and hold that and it turns off all those annoying driving bings and bongs, which is a really, really good thing. Elsewhere, the dash is nice. It's got fabrics instead of leathers, although the seats have leather. And this John Cooper works, of course, in the Aceman, gets a few extra racy touches, like your contrasting stitching. Otherwise, it is just a nice cabin to sit in. Seating position is pretty high against the ground, but actually when I sit down and relax in the car, I do feel quite cocooned in it. The dash is quite high. So it means you've got a commanding driving position to see over the bonnet, but at the same time, it does feel quite sporty. And these seats really add to that. Look at them, they look great, and they're very comfortable as well. Now for the back seats. How easy is it to get into the back of the Aceman? Well, the access is quite good actually. I mean, it's quite narrow, this window and door gap here, but it is at least quite squared off at the top. So hopping in, throwing the cable out the way and getting this bottle out the way too, you can see that my legroom with the seat, as I like it ahead, is okay. Actually, dare I say it, It's not very good, is it? It's pretty cramped in here. I'm surprised. The floor goes really low, and as you can see, the central tunnel for the middle passenger is chunky, but the floor goes nice and low down here. But you'll see that my knees, look, I'm sat with my feet tucked under. My knees are at almost a right angle. That's barely more than 90 degrees. So it's a bit cramped in here. Headroom is okay though, I must confess. So let's turn the camera around. If I lay back here and lift up this headrest, I can see, look, there's loads of headroom above me here. So that's pretty good. He says loads, it's like that much. But as some of you will know who've watched this channel before, I'm just under 6 foot. So I think for most people, this will be pretty comfortable headroom wise. But yeah, it's the footroom and the knee room isn't great. Let's see what the middle seat is like. Now I'm touching the ceiling, so that's not great. There's a panoramic sunroof up there. It means you lose a load of space here. So look, my head is crushed. I don't fit. And my feet, if I rotate the camera, as you can see, have to straddle the central tunnel in the middle, and my knee angle as a result is, dare I say it, acute for the mathematicians out there. So this is a pretty cramped back end.
Mercifully though, the ISOFIX bar is in easy reach, which probably goes some way to explaining who these back seats are intended for. Next, it's time to check out the boot,
which has a slight disadvantage compared to our Scorpionissima 600e. The first disadvantage is we don't get a standard electric tailgate on this car, whereas you do on the Scorpionissima trim of the 600e. It's an option on the other trims, but it is standard on the car we have here today. And also, the boot itself is slightly smaller in the Aceman. Now look, you've got a bit more in the way of underfloor storage, but it's just less usable, I guess, because it's just these little random compartments. The boot itself is slightly smaller, and of course, yes, you can fold down these rear seats, and it's very easy to do that with these big straps over here. But you'll see that it doesn't fold completely flat. So it's typically mini in that regard, in that it's not going to win in terms of space. But there is one key advantage for certain types of holidayers or people who like to drive into the continent. And it is the fact that you can get proper roof racks on this car that live on it permanently. Look, these are the kind of roof racks that kind of blend in and shouldn't create any noise on the motorway at higher speeds because they're aerodynamically styled. So that versus the Abarth is a key advantage, because on the Abarth, you have to buy the optional ones that clamp on and look pretty ugly, to be fair, and are going to make a heck of a lot of whistling noise on the motorway. So that's one key advantage to the Mini. Now, for the interior of the Abarth, it is quite different, and it's interesting because of that, because just like the Mini, this shares much of its cabin with a more basic, less sporty model, but Abarth has a history of throwing a load of colour and craziness into their cabins, and this is no different. While yes, the generic layout is quite sensible, this infotainment system is nowhere near as interesting as the one you get in the Mini, it is still pretty good to use. It's nice and simple, and you also get wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Same goes as well for this. This is much less interesting as a display than the central design you got on the other car, but at the same time it feels fun. But what really sets this car apart is just how much more racy some of the features are. Look at the steering wheel, it's flat bottomed. You've also got this annoying and fiddly thing that can be removed, but it gives you a lot of storage space. But the seats are really what set this car apart, because in the Scorpionissima trim, you get these Sabelt chairs with this lovely 90s style pattern as standard. Now these are an option, and they're several £1000s as well on other models. Of course, you also get flashes of Abarth here, and the seating position is a little bit lower. You don't feel like you're seeing over the bonnet as much in this car. It just feels a little bit more sporty. Other key things to note in the Abarth include the fact that you just press and hold this button over here. So just like the Mini, where you press the set button on here, you press and hold this car button to turn off all the annoying bings and bongs. And look, this is an Abarth electric car, which means if I press this, we have a sound generator. Sounds pretty fake at this side, doesn't it? What does it sound like at the back, ticking over? Yeah, I mean, look, you're not going to convince many people aged over the age of 12 that that is a proper petrol engine exhaust, but it's a gimmick, isn't it? But you know what? It's worth sticking around for when I drive it, because this interior sound is much improved versus the 500e. Now, in the rear seats of the Abarth, this is where it gets interesting, because look, these Scorpionissima seats have a rock solid back to them, but they do have indentations. First, by the way, we've got the lovely pattern design here continued into the rear, and the middle seat looks a little bit wider, doesn't it? Let's see how the comfort is. Now, we don't have a sunroof in this car, which means we don't have a big lump here, although there is weirdly a lump here for this vent, which might affect headroom there. But in terms of knee room, it's worse. I can't believe I'm saying this. It is a little bit worse than the Mini, and in fact my angle of my legs is probably about the same, but but because the seat head is rock solid, while there is an indentation, I'll try and get close in on the camera, while I can tuck my knees into these gaps here, which also double up as a way to tickle your driver, well, I'm still just less comfortable and there's less places to move. And if my driver was driving quickly, I'm gonna bash my knees into this. Look, listen to this. That is rock solid. So that is a loss, I think, here for the Abarth. And it's also true for the middle passenger as well, because look how slim the amount of space is down there. Obviously, this seat is pushed back really far, but if you look down here, this foot tunnel is really wide. It's wider than my hand span. So you're really gonna have to straddle. Also, the middle seat is a little bit wider, just a little bit, if you can see there. ISOFIX bars are almost just as easy to reach as well, but it's just a little zip down there if you're wondering. But let's see what it's like in the middle, because while we have this lump here, my bigger concern is the fact, now this seat is pushed all the way back, but as you can see, my knee here is being hit by this bit of plastic here. So the same would be true on this side. And if you look down here, we've only got one USB-C port and the foot tunnel is wide. So believe it or not, it's worse in this car. And for headroom, actually, this is where things get a bit confusing. It's better for headroom. So if you're tall but have tiny legs, you will be probably better in the Abarth. But if you have legs that are normal sized, well, this is definitely the more cramped car. There will be a little bit more room in terms of leg room in the non-Scorpionissima with the normal seats that you get in the Abarth 600e. But I mean, yeah, I wouldn't want to spend a long time in the back of this car. And to be fair, I wouldn't want to in the JCW either. Now, here is the area the Abarth claws back a bit of an advantage, although I should highlight the disadvantage I mentioned earlier. Look, no roof racks, but as you can see by this strip here, you will be able to buy those optional ones that you can stick on and ruin the design of your car in doing so, and also add all that wind noise. But look, we've got an electric tailgate as standard on the Scorpionissima, and you can also see that this boot is just a lot bigger. Look, if I clear out my rucksack here, I'll put it on, and throw away all my camera gear, you'll spot the boot is deeper. See, with it all cleared away now, look, it's just a longer boot, so it goes further back there. And if I lift up the floor, actually I have to take off this Velcro part here. If I lift up the floor, you will spot we can hide away the charge cable much easier. There's even more space in the underfloor storage here, although it is quite thin, as you can see. So you're not gonna get any big items in there, but the charge cable goes in easily. And if you're wondering, if you lift this flap up, it's just electrical gubbins. I guess technically you could hide something in there, but you probably wouldn't want to. So boot space, the Abarth definitely claws back the disadvantage it has versus the Mini when it comes to rear leg room. And when it comes to folding down these, well, they are almost just as easy, although not quite as easy. If I push this down, you will see, oh, flipping hell. One day there will be a better system for this stuff. Right, there we go, that down like that. You will see that while it doesn't go completely flat, you don't have the lip that we had in the Mini here. So sliding heavy items in will be easier in the Abarth, but you potentially don't have much more of an advantage in overall angle there. But I think that might be an advantage if you are, I don't know, taking your kids to uni and taking all the furniture with them, or if you just like sliding things around in the boot.
And a key thing to note is that while this Abarth and the Mini aren't massively spacious, they are bigger and therefore roomier than the slightly cheaper Alpine A290, which, by the way, is one of the best handling electric hot hatches I've driven yet.
Even under power, I can feel the back of the car just wanting to come around. That is just like my 182.
So the question is, how do the Abarth 600e and JCW Aceman compare? Let's hop into the Mini first.
So this is my first go in a Mini Aceman, and it makes spaceship sounds. This is my first go in a Mini Aceman at all. I've not even driven the normal car, so I'm getting first impressions here in the most organic sense. Now, the first thing I can feel in this car, having driven the Abarth here, is that this is quite fidgety. I can sense the stiffness in the ride, and I'm sat a little bit higher, which initially gave me the impression it was going to be quite squidgy, but there's definitely a lot of pitter-patter, consistent pitter-patter the whole time. If I go over these cat's eyes over here, oh, it does a better job of absorbing them than I thought, actually. So that's strange. Smaller frequency bumps seem to be the thing that give it the pitter-patter. Oh, it's quite quick, actually. It feels quicker than it actually is, probably because one of the windows is down a little bit, but also because the way the power delivery is if I put my foot down, it's a real hit you in the backside. You can sense the BMW electronics in this car, because of course some of the bits are shared with BMWs, especially the smaller ones. Now if I change into a different driving mode, which are called experiences in Mini, because Mini never does things normally, and they never give you normal driving modes either. You got to go through vivid and personal just to get down to the one we all want to be in. It's John Cooper Works mode. Oh, and the digital display's got a bit more interesting. Right, let's get onto the flat and see how quick it accelerates. What a bunch of strange sounds. I don't know if you can hear that. Let me do that one more time with the mic right down by the speaker. Oh, it vibrates when you do foot to the floor on the brakes. The whole car's going. That's 60. I don't know what time that was, but it made some strange sounds. It sounds a bit like a spaceship, a lot like a spaceship. But there is one thing I'm noticing, and that is that when you do that hard acceleration, all the electrical theatrics and all the fun gizmos on this car, they're sort of distracting you from the fundamental underlying disadvantage it has, and that is a lack of limited slip differential, because you can feel the front right and left wheel scrabbling differently as they try and pull you away. And so you can feel the car tugging on this side, tugging on that side, and you get this slight jiggling sensation through the steering wheel.
That sensation is caused by the front brakes doing their best to simulate the torque juggling abilities of a limited slip diff. The Mini's electronically controlled solution doesn't feel as fluid in operation as the Abarth's proper slippy diff, but to be fair, it does prevent torque steer, meaning you can really press on. Do that, and the car's fidgety ride does start to smooth out a bit, but not entirely.
Let's chuck it into this bend up here. Right, there's a lot of grip in this corner, I know, so I'm not expecting tons in the way of movement, but let's see what it does. Noisy. No, do you know what? It's because it's quite soft. You probably saw from the GoPro moving there, because it's quite soft. Instead of getting this feeling of like tippy-toe agility that you get in some hot hatches, on this you just kind of have this sense of the wheels and tyres are compressed into the ground and then the body kind of floats on top of it. Where the fun is in this car is definitely in the gaminess of the whole experience. Not only is this central screen giving me Mario Kart vibes, not only are the noises feeling like I'm literally in an arcade game. It's like a cross between like what, Alien versus Predator and something like that. But it just feels a digital Mini experience. One that's quick enough to make you giggle when you put your foot down, but if you're a real hot hatch enthusiast, you might find it a little bit numb in other ways. Now I'm back in the car I'm a bit familiar with, the Abarth 600e in Scorpionissima form. I actually did the launch of this car and I really enjoyed it, but now I'm driving it on more generic roads, ones that haven't been chosen by the brand for being brilliant. In fact, I've chosen roads that are a little bit bumpy and a little bit rough. And that's why, straight away I can notice the Abarth is a very slightly smoother riding. Now, don't get me wrong, over the cat size, bizarrely, the Abarth feels a little bit firmer. The Mini seemed to have a bit more squidge in the tyre. It had a bit thicker tyre walls, actually, so I think that might be the help. But the damping in this car feels both slightly more tied down. The suspension feels a little bit less loose. The body seems to be held in a slightly, definitely feels a little bit more hunkered down, but conversely, the ride feels a little bit better as well. I'm not noticing so many of the bumps. Don't get me wrong, this is still a hot hatch. It still rides with that fidgetiness you're going to get. So don't be buying one of these if you just jumped out of a Citroen C3 with that squishy suspension. No, this is sporty always, but it's a little bit more forgiving. And so on a longer journey, this is definitely going to be the car that you're probably going to get out of feeling a little bit less worn out in.
That's partly down to the fact that the Abarth gets, as standard, hydraulic bump stops in its suspension, which means it can deal with the lumps and bumps of a road without ever feeling harsh, even when you're really going for it.
Another key thing I have just noticed, and I can chuck in here and feel, is this is a big deal for people like me, the nerds who love driving hot hatches, and that is the limited slip differential, which has eliminated torque steer entirely. As I said earlier, the tyres on this car, they are not as performance focused apparently as the ones on the Mini, but really they're plenty good enough. In fact, the grip is superb, and I think what I'm feeling straight away is, because this car has a little bit of negative camber, the wheels are at a slight angle, which means it's slightly more sporty in its steering responses, and because the weight of the steering, even in the normal mode, I've forgotten I can put it into Scorpionissimo track. Well, even in all the modes, because the steering weighting's the same, it just feels more pointy, more darty, more alert, more energetic, more responsive. But then conversely, the powertrain doesn't feel anywhere near as thumpy. The Mini feels more punchy. This is a more gradual, more linear delivery of power, but because you have that more gradual delivery and also the limited slip diff, it means the car puts the power down better, so you can actually just be a bit more of a hooligan behind the wheel and just enjoy the car. You can also chuck it around. It really feels like it wants to be thrown around, and the rear does start to come around on you. You can feel it leans into its outside suspension, compresses and stays in that position. So instead of doing what the Mini did, which is where it kind of toppled and continued to roll a bit and almost sort of squidged out the inputs you'd put in, the movements you made in the wheel kind of get lost in the roll. Here, there is a bit of roll, but then when it steadies out, your inputs, your reactions, your throttle or accelerator input, don't have a throttle body on an electric car, Sam, every single input makes a difference. And I like the fact that you can have B mode, which is where it ramps up the regen, left on even in the track setting. Now Abarth did tune it, the setting that is, to run without B mode, so the braking feels more generic. So if I were to use the brakes without it, yeah, they do feel a little bit more predictable. It's a much more progressive pedal than the Minis. The Mini, like it's thumpier in power delivery, it's also more grabby in braking power. This is much more progressive. It's making the bings and bongs. Right, let's press and hold the car button, switch them off. Thank you, Abarth. Thank you, Mini, for giving us those buttons. Okay, to give the Abarth a fair shot, let's turn on the sound generator when it comes to the noise, that is, because I said the Mini sounds more fun noise-wise, but this does make its own noises, especially out the back. Now, the Mini doesn't do any of that out the back. It's all inside. But in this Abarth, you also get treated to some noise as well. And I'm going to say it is much improved, as I said earlier, compared to the 500e, which sound a bit, in its early spec anyway, a bit drony, a bit meh all the time. Meh. Sweeter, much sweeter. This just makes a sound that is reminiscent of, it's definitely not the same as, reminiscent of a 4-cylinder engine with a sweet exhaust note. So while they're very similar on paper, in reality and from behind the wheel, these two cars couldn't be much more different. In a way, it means if you're a nutter who loves to drive really fast, well, the Abarth is the clear winner. But if you've got kids to entertain or you just like a giggle for more digital reasons, the Mini is probably the one for you. Thank you for watching the video. If you've enjoyed it, let me know in the comments below which would you choose. And of course, if you haven't already, please get clicking the subscribe button to help me film more videos like this.